ध्रुवा, दूसरा बड़ा ध्रुव जो है यूएस।
हम्म।
तो यूएस को लेकर के आपको क्या लगता है, स्पेशली जो आजकल यूएस का जो मतलब जिससे ख्याति ने शुरू ही किया था, टैरिफ टैरिफ खेल रहा है, और पॉसिबली मे बी ट्रम्प इज ओनली 4 इयर्स, तो शायद ये तो एक 4 साल की बात है, पर जनरली एक एक डोमिनेंट पावर है। एंड आई डोंट नो कि आपको क्या लगता है, जो जो ट्रम्प की पॉलिसीज हैं, दे विल आउटलास्ट ट्रम्प, या किस तरह से हम अगले इवन 4 साल हैंडल करने चाहिए यूएस को?
I wrote an article in 2019. It was when 1 year before November 2019 that said many parts of Trump's policies will outlive Trump, and I think a lot of them survived under Biden as well. I'll give you the 3-4 main areas where this happened. One is, and these I think these tell you something about American politics, and this is basically the center is shifting in American politics in a few ways. I think today we have an America that is behaving more like a normal country. That is a country like everybody else. Huh? This is all that's happening. They're saying, why are we subsidizing the security of Europe? Europe is rich; they can do it themselves. They have a war on their border in Ukraine. Why are they turning to us to provide most of the military aid? This is a very good question they're asking, and the Europeans know this, by the way. They understand this, but the fact is they're not getting their act together fast enough. Some European countries are, but many of them are not doing it fast enough to meet the challenge. So Americans are asking this question: why are we entering into wars with no end sight? This doesn't mean they won't use force. They will continue to use force, but we're not going to enter into an open-ended war like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan and spend a lot of money and lives to build up another country. We are not going to offer trading terms that mean that we will import more than we will export. That is done. So I think on these issues, there is today the Democrats will say all of this very nicely. Republicans will say, and Trump will say it not nicely, but there is actually agreement on many of these issues. So Biden did not conclude a single new trade agreement. Huh? I think there's some differences. I think the Democrats are still more sensitive to the allies, to the NATO, Japan, Australia, in a way the Republicans don't have much patience for today. There on some issues like climate change, there are big differences, ideological differences. But on many issues today, this is a new America. And I would say that India is actually better prepared than most to deal with this new America because it actually reflects in some ways how India looks at the world, right? So it's the greatest discomfort is in Europe. There's also some discomfort amongst the adversaries of China, Russia. They're trying to read how will all of these steps, these disruptive steps, make America stronger, or will it make it weaker? Maybe a bit of both. Where can we exploit those opportunities? They're going to try to exploit some of them. We're worried about that this would put America on a stronger footing to compete with us. So India is actually doesn't have the worries that China or Russia or Iran has, but doesn't have the concerns that NATO countries do about US dependency. So I think that this is the backdrop for why Prime Minister Modi is coming next week to the US. I think an early meeting. Trump has not spoken positively or negatively about India. I think he's threatened tariffs against Canada, Mexico, EU, China, but India so far has not been mentioned. So let's see what comes out of the visit. It may be the start of something, but I think the feeling is this is a country we can do business with. We can still find ways that you benefit and we benefit. We will give on some areas, but we will take in other areas. And if this is a business deal, it's something both are very comfortable with. So, I'm not saying there won't be problems. Huh? I mean, we're going to have some tough difficulties. I think on trade issues, they will. There's a very real possibility that Trump will say, "Acha, you have conceded these things. I will pocket those concessions." Now, actually, I think this is gundagiri. I mean, it's classic. I mean, if you look what he's done with Canada, Mexico in the last 24 hours, it is classic gundagiri. I mean, it's. So if
धमका दिया उसको धमका दिया
this is Bihar politics at an international stage.
पर ध्रुव मतलब ट्रम्प के अलावा भी भारत और यूएस जितने अभी करीब हुए पिछले कुछ सालों में, उससे और करीब हो भी सकते हैं क्या? मतलब क्योंकि कभी-कभी ऐसा लगता है कि जैसे मैं एक फ्रेमवर्क यूज़ करता हूँ, एक पीपल टू मतलब एक त्रिकोण है भारत-अमेरिका रिश्ता, उसमें पीपल टू पीपल हमेशा से स्ट्रॉन्ग रहा है। दूसरा है स्टेट टू स्टेट, वो इम्प्रूव हुआ है पिछले 10-15 समय, और तीसरा है
बी टू
स्टेट
बी।
टू पीपल, मतलब यूएस के लोग भारत के स्टेट को
हाँ
कैसे परसीव करते हैं और भारत के लोग यूएस स्टेट को कैसे परसीव
हाँ
करते हैं। तो पीपल टू पीपल कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं था, स्टेट टू स्टेट इम्प्रूव हो गया है, लेकिन स्टेट टू पीपल वाला जो एंगल है वो हमेशा से भारत में हमेशा एंटी अमेरिकन, जैसा आपने कहा,
हाँ
वहां पे भी लोग अलग समझते हैं।
हाँ
तो
हाँ
किस तरीके से सोचे इसमें?
हाँ no, also I think the people to people is getting more complicated. Okay,
हम्म
so the politics, sometimes the politics in the diaspora in the US is now affecting India in ways, different ways. Whether it's the Khalistan movement, whether it is, there are different interest groups here. So I think even the people to people is going to be not bad, but it'll become more complicated. Just as because the diaspora, when you have 50 lakh Indian origin people in the US, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have some complications.
या सही
So
हाँ
and again, it's mixed actually. I mean, the Amir log bhi hai, but it's also, you now have quite a lot of undocumented people coming in as well. So, but yeah, Jatar, I mean, I did an engagement in Florida with Desi community people, and some of them are very, very wealthy, very, very rich. Uh, so people like a company state to state, I think broadly has been good. You're right, state to people, there's still big problems. Um, I think one would have to get into in India on the sociological factors that
हम्म,
why there is this deep set skepticism of the US. Sometimes the US does things that add to
या
the skepticism. Bangladesh,
हाँ
there was some things that certainly helped fuel a lot of that anti-American sentiment. So I'm not saying the state is blameless at all, but a lot of it is some of the things I read are completely ridiculous and conspiratorial and all of that. So I mean, there's going to be a little bit of that. I mean, overall, though, public sentiment in the US, in India, is quite positive on the US compared to many other countries, and even amongst US allies. If you look at public surveys in Korea or Australia or Germany, they're much more. The public is much more skeptical of the US than average Indian people. I think it's more the intellectual, the India International Center crowd, and it's the
हम्म
intellectual elite that is, and universities, professors and stuff who are much more skeptical of the US. Even business people, many of them are quite positive on the US. They see investment from the US. So that, I think, there'll be always be something. On the US side, I think there's a bigger problem, which is just lack of awareness about India. I mean, I spend so much time just basic things people do not know. I've seen in well-regarded authors in the US talking about President Modi. I mean, I mentioned this as these are simple. It's a simple thing, but the just the lack of awareness is quite astonishing. I forget about Indian society. India is one of the most complex societies in the world, but even I'll give another example of this. There's almost no university. I think there are a handful that offer advanced Indian language, modern languages. Uh, you know, uh, I think Harvard offers Hindi and Tamil. University of Chicago has done a little bit, but most, there are more people studying Italian than studying Hindi. There are more people in US universities, right? Why is that the case? So, and if you take out Indian origin people, NRIs, that's the numbers would fall in. I mean, I always feel a little disheartened when I do a public lecture, which I do every 2 weeks somewhere, and I look in the audience and it's all Desis. Yeah? I mean,
हम्म
it's
हम्म
either people who, second generation Indian origin people, or people from India. You don't see any non-Indians. You don't see many non-Indians in the audience, and I think we need to do a lot more, and that's partly why I do what I do in ORF America. It's to do that, but we're small. We can only do it right now in a small community, but we need 50 other organizations like this to explain India. And again, the Indian politics gets in the way oftentimes. So Sometimes the only thing people hear, I'll give you an example. During the farmers' protest, there was a lot I would hear about, oh, why is the Indian government so anti-farmer? Now, if you want to explain, Acha, what this is the farm law, the only the protests are happening in Haryana and Punjab, and it's only these communities. And the top line that everyone took away is the Indian government is anti-farmer. So again, we have a very simplistic views, sometimes motivated by special interests, one way or the other, and they contest each other quite a lot. A similar thing, there's this very controversial law in California about caste discrimination, which finally the governor of California overruled. Now, you ask an average U.S. politician, what do you know anything about this issue, either arguments for or against caste discrimination? They would have no idea. They don't even understand what it means. So again, a lot that needs to be done in the. I give the U.S., but the same is true in most other countries, just to educate people about basics of India.
सही बात है। तो बहुत सही लगा ध्रुवा, और फॉरेन पॉलिसी पे तो हम लोग घंटों चर्चा कर सकते हैं, लेकिन मैं हमारे दर्शकों और श्रोताओं को ज़रूर बोलूँगा, एक किताब ज़रूर पढ़िए। हमने ध्रुवा को बोला इसको हिंदी में भी प्लीज़ प्रकाशित कीजिए, बहुत ज़रूरी है कि काफ़ी लोग पढ़ें। और एक और अच्छी चीज़ लगी मुझे कि आपने अंत में एक बहुत अच्छी लिस्ट भी बनाई है किताबों की, तो वो किताबों का जो सेट आपने बताया वो भी काफ़ी कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव है, तो वो भी सही लगा। तो बहुत-बहुत शुक्रिया। और
Including Pranay's book, actually, yes, I think is also included.
हाँ, वो मेरी भी, यस, थैंक्स। तो ये आप ज़रूर पढ़िए, और मुझे तो बहुत मज़ा आया ये पढ़ के। तो बहुत-बहुत शुक्रिया ध्रुवा। और फॉरेन पॉलिसी आपने जिस तरीके से एक हिस्टोरिकल, ऐतिहासिक तौर पे भी समझाया है और कंटेम्परेरी लेंस भी लिया है, वो कई लोगों को मज़ा आएगा और एक डीप स्टडी मिलेगी फॉरेन पॉलिसी की। तो बहुत-बहुत
Thank
शुक्रिया।
you.
धन्यवाद, धन्यवाद।
थैंक यू।